It is Sunday, the 27th of March 2016. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And what with it being Easter Sunday 2016, I am resurrecting, not they haven't already resurrected them, but I'm resurrecting some very old picket signs, some classic picket signs that date back to the earliest stages of this protest. I've been using these over the past Sundays, but they've basically been my freestanding picket signs that lean up against trees and lampposts, like that one over there. But this time they're being displayed in my hands so I can make sure that people see them. So in my left hand I have a picket sign that says Church of the Image Tarnishing Minister. And that picket sign originally referred to Reverend Ray Drennan and his image tarnishing behavior of attacking former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau's Roman Catholic rite state funeral in an editorial in the Montreal Gazette. That is an opinion piece, op-ed, opinion editorial, kind of an extended letter to the editor kind of thing. He basically trashed the funeral as being a sham state funeral. He said the rituals were meaningless and so on, all because it was a Roman Catholic ceremony. In Reverend Ray Drennan's anti-religious atheist mind, a state funeral should only be a secular event, a non-religious event. In Reverend Ray Drennan's mind, Pierre Trudeau could have had a private Catholic funeral, but the state funeral should not have been Roman Catholic. That's just, but he has a right to make such an argument, whether it's valid or not. But he did it in an offensive, intolerant, insulting manner. He did it in a manner that was so insulting and insensitive, intolerant, that following the publication of this opinion editorial, which most ironically was titled Wrong Message. Basically, Reverend Ray Drennan was trying to say that the fact that the Canadian government had a state funeral for a former prime minister that was held, according to his religious beliefs, was the Canadian government sending a wrong message. Well, if anyone sent a wrong message, it was Reverend Ray Drennan with his intolerant and insulting and offensive attack on the fact that Pierre Elliott Trudeau's state funeral was a Roman Catholic rite. It was a Roman Catholic ceremony. And my position is that, if you're a Canadian Prime Minister or former Canadian Prime Minister, or other, state official or, how can I put it, well-known and respected public figure, that the state decides to have a state funeral for, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that state funeral being held in accordance to what your religious beliefs are. If you're Hindu, you can have a Hindu state funeral. If you're Jewish, you have a Jewish state funeral. If you're Roman Catholic, well, you have every right to have a Roman Catholic state funeral. But in Reverend Ray Drennan's anti-religious, atheist mind. No, because it's a state funeral, and the state has to be secular, blah, 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 separation of church and state, which quite frankly doesn't actually exist up in Canada. We have a somewhat different relationship in terms of church and state in Canada. It's not like the United States, where there's very strong separation of church and state. For instance, the head of state of Canada, if I'm not mistaken, is the Queen of England still. We have a Governor General who represents the Queen of England, who's the head of state. Well, the Queen of England, besides being the Queen of England and essentially so far the Queen of Canada, she's also the head of the Anglican Church. So the very top, according to our, current political situation, figurehead person is the Queen of England. And besides being the Queen of England, she's also the top head of the Anglican Church, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, where Reverend Ray Drennan's argument might have made a bit more sense in the United States, up here in Canada, he wasn't on very solid ground. But the main thing is regardless of whether he was on solid ground or not, he presented his argument in a manner that was insulting to people. And in fact, it was so insulting that just shake your hands, pretend you haven't got a clue what's going on. Pretend there's no real issues at hand. Just bury your head in the sand like everyone else at this church does. Happy Easter. So typical dismissive response from one of the church members, like sort of like shrugging, what the fuck kind of thing. They know why I'm protesting, and it goes well beyond Reverend Ray Drennan's wrong message, his anti-religious intolerance and bigotry. That's where it began, and it began before his attack on Pierre Elliott Trudeau's state funeral. It began with an attack on me personally, but following his attack on Pierre Elliott Trudeau's state funeral in October of 2000, if I remember correctly. In fact, if I remember correctly, it was October 9th of 2000 that the op-ed piece was published in the Gazette. So if you want to go find it in the archives, the Gazette, just go to the October 9th Montreal Gazette and check what it has to say. You can go to a library, they should have it on microfilm. So anyway, the Church of the Image Tarnishing Minister picket sign originally was all about Reverend Ray Drennan, how he tarnished the image, very publicly tarnished the image of the Unitarian Church of Montreal by, intolerantly and insultingly criticizing the fact that Pierre Elliott Trudeau's state funeral was a Roman Catholic religious ceremony. Getting back to that, following the publication of that op-ed, I decided to write a letter to the editor stating, in my view, how Reverend Ray Drennan, besides being insulting and offensive, was just plain wrong in his argument. So I wrote a fairly lengthy letter to the editor, and I submitted it to the Gazette. And a couple of days went by, I didn't hear anything from the Gazette. So I phoned them up, as I did at the time, just to see, did you actually get it? Make sure they actually got the letter, and if they were considering publishing it. And essentially, the person who answered the phone said, "Well, you've got competition, Mr. Edgar." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, we have a ballpark figure of 50 letters to the editor, every single one of them condemning Reverend Ray Drennan's actions, his op-ed editorial. So in other words, we've got already 50 or so people all condemning. Like, according to this, the person who was the letters editor for the Gazette at the time, not one of the letters to the editor was in any way supportive of Reverend Ray Drennan. Every single one of them was critical of Reverend Ray Drennan's behavior, including at least one from a person who described himself as a devout atheist. So even a devout atheist found Reverend Ray Drennan's wrong message opinion editorial to be offensive, and that was one of the 5 out of 50 or so letters that actually got published. My letter never got published. The Gazette published 5 of the 50, from various different people and slightly different perspectives, but they were all condemning Reverend Ray Drennan. So essentially, that is where the image tarnishing minister thing comes from. In causing first of all, in just signing his name to an offensive opinion editorial that was intolerant and insulting towards Roman Catholics, and indeed other people, because it didn't attack only Roman Catholics. It actually, from his sort of anti-religious perspective, in Reverend Ray Drennan's mind, the rituals in the funeral rituals were meaningless. And he actually said this. He didn't specifically say that the funeral rituals were meaningless. He basically broadened it out to essentially all religious rituals being meaningless, except, of course, Unitarian Universalist ones. But that's essentially the thrust of his statement, which unfortunately I don't remember the exact words right now in the fuller. He definitely said meaningless rituals, but I can't broaden out on either side of that. But he essentially characterized pretty much, all theistic religious rituals as being meaningless, because in his mind God doesn't exist, so all of these rituals are just for nothing kind of thing. In any case, the article itself, because it was signed Reverend Ray Drennan, Unitarian Church of Montreal at the end, that in itself tarnished the image of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, because the church looked bad as a result of its minister going very public with some offensive and intolerant attack on the Roman Catholic Church and religion more generally. And then there was the follow-up letters to the editor. As I said, not less than, I believe it was 5. I'm not going to say not less. It wasn't 3, it wasn't 6. I'm pretty sure it wasn't 4. It was 5 letters to the editor, all condemning Reverend Ray Drennan. So that's like a second publication in the Gazette, where now people are, saying, what kind of church is Unitarian Church of Montreal? And at least one of the letters, somebody made a statement along those lines, like, I always thought Unitarians were intolerant, but this is out of alignment with what Unitarians claim to believe, kind of thing, which of course it was. So that's a double whammy. But prior to that, Reverend Ray Drennan had indirectly caused the image tarnishing of the Unitarian Church of Montreal by attacking me personally and refusing to retract his statements, refusing to properly apologize, and basically trying to bully me out of the church, which caused me to engage in peaceful public protest against his anti-religious intolerance. So a couple of years before he slammed the Roman Catholic Church in the Montreal Gazette, he'd already contributed to the tarnishing of the image of the Unitarian Church of Montreal by causing me to go public about his anti-religious intolerance and bigotry, and the fact that the Unitarian Church of Montreal did absolutely nothing to hold him accountable for it, and essentially kicked me out for complaining about it. So that's what that Church of the Image Tarnishing Minister began as. That's the story, how it originated. But the fact of the matter is, the current minister of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, Reverend Diane Rollert, has, in her own ways, tarnished the image of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, or indirectly contributed to the further tarnishing of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. So she is, as far as I'm concerned, an image tarnishing minister. And, you know, there's actually a fair number of Unitarian Universalist ministers that can be reasonably described as image tarnishing ministers. In fact, the current president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, Reverend Dr. Peter Morales, can be...
It's the Unitarian Church.
Yes. I'm protesting a variety of issues. This sign here, the Church of the Image Tarnishing Minister, it's a very old picket sign. You can see it's like well worn.
Yeah.
That picket sign I created back in 2000, 15 years.
Tell me why.
Because
I don't know any...
the minister of the church at the time,
Yeah.
Reverend Ray Drennan, after Pierre Elliott Trudeau died and he had the Roman Catholic state funeral,
Yeah.
the minister of the church attacked the fact that it was a Roman Catholic state funeral.
If he's Roman Catholic, it's going to be a Roman Catholic funeral.
Exactly, that's my position.